think numbers are starting to slow in, so anyone else who will join us as we come. So thank you everybody for coming to this webinar today. My name is Dominic Shaw. I work for Ukie, who are the trade body for video games and interactive entertainment. So I just want to give a great welcome to everyone who's come here from the games industry, but also the wider network and other sectors from within RightTrack's network. But also anyone from in-betweens, either social media, newsletters, or word of mouth. Again, welcome to everyone. Glad you can join us today. I'll be handing over to my colleague in arms, Stephen, in a bit, but I just want to take a moment to say that towards the end of this webinar, I will be back on the screen just to give anyone who's not aware about Raise the Game a bit of information, highlight some of our achievements, and overall tell you how you can get involved. But before I go, just to say, if you wish to share your thoughts, do any live tweets, please feel free to. We've just got the Twitter handles and the LinkedIn handles on screen now, so take notes of them. Also the hashtag Raise the Game. Please use that when you're live posting out. And we look forward to receiving both your live commentary and post feedback. But for now, let's get you all involved in this great webinar, and I will now pass over to Steve.
Thank you very much, Dom. Appreciate that. Hello, welcome to this webinar from all of us here at RightTrack Learning. I'd just like to take a moment to explore what we're going to be thinking about during our session here today. So one of the things that we'd like to think about is what is it we actually mean by bringing yourself to work? The other thing that we'll be thinking about are what are some of the barriers, what are the things that get in the way to us being our authentic selves? And then we're going to think about why is it important that we do something about removing these barriers? Finally, I'd like to end up at the end of the session thinking about creating some ideas to help us drive some positive change. So that's kind of the roadmap for what we're going to be looking at. Before we dive into our session today, I thought we could just do a little bit of a straw poll here. And I just really wanted to look at the fact of whether you have ever felt the need to hold yourself back from showing the real self at work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll now, and it's a simple yes/no response for this one. So I'm just going to launch that poll now. And I'll just give you a few moments to cast your votes. Just a point of noting that all of our polls, everything that we do from an interactive perspective today is totally anonymous and is not attributable to you as an individual. We're just looking at the overall numbers. As those votes are coming in now, we'll just give that another 20 seconds or so for the last votes to come in. Okay then. Some interesting results. I'm just going to share that with you. I'll close that poll and share those results. So from our poll, our straw poll of the attendees here, 79% of you have felt at some stage you haven't been able to bring your whole self to work, which means only 21% of our audience today here is feeling in a position where they can bring their authentic self to work. That's kind of a really large percentage, isn't it? And this is why it's worth us looking at this today. So let us take a little bit of a deep dive into that now. When we talk about our authentic self, what we mean is who you truly are as a person. The presenting of yourself to the world through perhaps your words and your actions, your thoughts and aesthetics, regardless of any occupation or job that you've got or the influence of others. At the end of the day, it's the true representation of you. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So it kind of begs the question, why would we leave some of the real self at home? And what I'd like to do is take some time to just explore what some of the barriers are that we might have that make us feel unable to bring our authentic selves to work. What we're going to do is we're going to use another piece of software called Menti, and we're going to create a word cloud of all of our thoughts and ideas. So I would like you to consider, to start with, what are some of the barriers that you have to bringing yourself to work? And I'm just going to share with you a reference that I'd like you to go to. So either in a separate browser window or whether it's on a mobile phone, anything will do, or a separate device. If you could navigate yourself in your browser to Menti, menti.com, and then it'll ask you for a code. In that code, if you could type 5783345. That's just shown on the top of the slide there. And you can add more than one word or phrase in there. Excellent, we've got some ideas coming through now. So I'm just going to let those filter through, and then we'll take a look at what we've got. They're still coming through thick and fast, so that's great. Okay. We seem to have certainly had some reoccurring themes coming through, which are represented by the larger writing on that word cloud. Judgment is clearly seen as a number one reason here. People fearing that they're being judged. People fear of criticism from other people, or their own personal confidence we have coming through. You know, confidence is a massive element of people being able to show themselves. Professionalism, as fear coming through, prejudice, unconscious bias, homophobia, conformity, culture, discrimination, a lack of diversity, job security, people actually considering and fearing about their own job security if they actually show their own true selves. Okay, we've got a really nice picture building there of some of the different aspects that kind of stop us being able to show our real selves. So I'm going to stop that one for just a moment and just move back to our slide deck here. So having a little problem with my share here, just one moment. Okay, hopefully you should have my slides back there, and we're back in business again. Certainly when we look at all of those reasons, those barriers to us being able to bring our real self, it's complicated. As human beings, we're not only having to navigate through our feelings and our thoughts, we're also having to operate within communities and organizations which have their rules and their cultural norms. And these influence our behaviors and our actions. For some of us here today, conflict can be a daily part of our working world, where we're unable to feel able to bring our true selves to work. For others, it might be something that you don't give a huge amount of thought to. But let's just take a look at some of those barriers, some of those things that stop us from being able to bring our true selves to work, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. So some of those barriers really split into what I would describe two camps. There's the inner conflicts that we have, and then there's the outer influences. Of course, both of these things interact with each other. They feed off each other, but it's kind of a neat way of thinking about it. So let's first look at some of the inner conflicts that we feel. Well, as it was echoed in our word cloud, these really are around areas about self-doubt, perhaps. The fact that that inner voice that we have that can plant those unhelpful thoughts or seeds of ideas that then put doubt in our mind about our abilities to either perform effectively or to face certain situations. Sometimes the inner conflicts are around lack of confidence, and those can show themselves up in lots of different ways, whether it's feeling confident in our appearance or our ability to handle situations, or even being able to voice our opinions. Sometimes it's around fear of exclusion, because often what we have is a desire to fit in, to be accepted by others. And fear is one of those emotions that we need to keep in check. Another inner conflict is around imposter syndrome, feeling that we are in some way a fraud, that we're not worthy of perhaps our role or our position. This is kind of a really important aspect, and we will be looking at this in a little bit more detail in a moment. But let's just turn our mind to some of the external or outer influences. We've all experienced those micro behaviors. Those are the little gestures, small looks, etc., that people make that make us feel excluded or judged. You're not normally able to put your finger on exactly why it is that you feel that way, but it's the small things that they do. Sadly, there will be other people that have experienced outright bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And both of these experiences can result in us not able to bring our true selves, to make our true selves visible, or to make ourselves less visible. Or we try and end up making adjustments to try and make ourselves fit in. Then we have within society, within your organizations, and within your teams, sets of spoken and unspoken rules, expectations. Some of those rules are there to keep us safe, some to maintain harmony, but some of those things are driven by stereotypes that are sadly reinforced around us every single day. And others maybe just happen by chance. So reflect on your team at the moment. What are the expectations for how you dress, perhaps? Are there any expectations about the colour of your hair? What are some of the rules around swearing, whether written or unswearing? Because in some teams, you're not part of the team unless you can keep up with the banter. What about working hours or the time that you leave work or clock off? All of these things are tiny examples of how unspoken rules will influence your behaviour. And this can lead to what we call conformity and groupthink. Even when we don't agree with them. So let's explore these in just a little bit more detail before we start looking at some of the solutions. Imposter syndrome was first written about in 1978, actually, by two female doctors, Pauline Clance and Susan Imes. And it's a phenomenon where individuals have feelings and experiences around intellectual phoniness. In other words, they have self-doubt about their ability and fear and feelings of being a fraud. One description I've heard about imposter syndrome that particularly rings true with me is it's like being a secret agent, but in the worst imaginable way. So, what I would like to do is take a snapshot of those of us here that have experienced imposter syndrome in the last 12 months. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll, and that poll's just launched. You should see that on your screen now. And the question is, have you ever experienced any form of imposter syndrome in the last 12 months? Just close that poll. I'm just going to share those results with you now. So as you can see from those results, 76% of this audience have experienced imposter syndrome in the past 12 months. That is a really high and significant figure. We're not the only people to have experienced or looked at imposter syndrome. In a study that was conducted over 3,000 adults in the UK workplace in 2019 by Access Commercial Finance, found that 66% of women and 56% of men struggle with imposter syndrome. So in the interest of inclusion, the fact that some people don't necessarily identify themselves with male or female, let's take that as an average figure of 61%. 61%, that's a real struggle. That means 2 in 3 of your colleagues have struggled with significant levels of self-doubt in the last 12 months. Even if this isn't something that you experience yourself personally, we need to be aware of this and remember this when we're interacting with the other people around us. We need to take time to do things like share kind words of encouragement and praise. If we don't address this, just think of the limits that we're putting on our own and our collective success. It is within everybody's power to help and support each other to shine just that bit more. One of the things that we list on our barriers was the need to balance the desire to be ourselves, to live our authentic lives, with the expectations and the guidelines of the things that are around us, that surround us. You know, as we've already said, society is governed by societal rules, by norms, many of which, as we've said, are designed to keep us safe and to maintain harmony. Many of them will be reinforced over generations, and some of them will never really been questioned or challenged. Organizations have policies and procedures, and they have an organizational culture. Our own teams may well have their own microculture. Sometimes, if these values align with our personal values, that feels positive. But sometimes they don't. And that can lead to a lot of negativity, as we said earlier. It really is a complicated landscape that we have to navigate here. What I'd like to do is share with you an extract from a Zoom training course that I delivered recently. It really does demonstrate a very real dilemma of striking a balance between being ourselves and fitting into society. Just to note, rest assured that everybody that is involved in this has given their permission for this to be shared. And this is a tiny, small extract from a much larger discussion that we were having. It was a discussion around race equality, specifically how some families with Black adolescent boys are coached by their parents to modify their behavior, so as in order to protect them from the stereotypes around them that exist. Although what we're talking about today is much bigger and broader than any one protected characteristic, I think this clip really demonstrates the conflicts that exist. And that's really why I wanted to share it with you today. So let's just take a look at that.
It just, the fact that people, you know, anyone of color, they have to change who they are. Sorry, it's getting really emotional. It just makes me so furious, because nobody, and to have to tell a child and say, you can't be who you are, because, I mean, that's, it just makes me so angry. And my daughter's dual heritage. And I have to say, there's a part of me that's relieved that I have a girl and not a boy. I'm not saying she won't have issues, but obviously for young Black men, they're targeted far more than young Black women. But even applying for independent secondary schools, we have had advice from an older Black lady who's amazing. She said, maybe just think about how she has her hair for her interviews. Because if she has the hair out, she has this incredible, you know, big afro. You know, some schools, they will have a perception of what that means she is as a person, that she's not serious, that she's not taking her work seriously, that she's not going to be a good representative of the school. And a part of me is just like, no, I don't want to do that. Why should we have to conform to that? But then there's this other part of me going, that's reality. And so what do you, how do you weigh that up? It's just, ugh.
So for me, that was a discussion or a sharing of information that kind of really sums up those dilemmas that we face, or that can be faced in navigating our way through these extremely complicated situations that we find ourselves in. So let's turn our minds. Let's think about, how do we find our way through these dilemmas? Well, first, I think it's really important to say that there is no right or wrong answer. What's most important is that we make our decisions from a conscious point of view. We need to evaluate each situation and check in with our own inner sat-nav whilst we're aware of the consequences of perhaps going against the grain. There are going to be times when we decide to be brave, and other times when we may make the choice to decide to compromise or to go with the flow. In order to be able to reach our end game, these are the decisions that we need to make. Whether we like it or not, it's a complex world. That we're always going to have social norms and stereotypes, organizational and team culture to navigate. But if we consciously and mindfully make those choices, if we consciously make those decisions, we'll be acting with integrity. We'll be taking steps towards authenticity. For some of us, This is going to be an ever-evolving journey. Just a note, for any of you that would like to be inspired to push boundaries a bit more, then we recommend this book. It's called Be More Pirate by Sam Allenden. It's a really great book. Actually, our RightTrack's founder, Kasmin Cooney, has written a book review about this in RightTrack's book club. And she said, this is a no-nonsense, kick-ass book that's fired me up. It's got me to look at the world differently and start making some good trouble. Making good trouble is a phrase that's used a lot in this book. It's a really lovely concept, and it's perfect for anyone that's trying to find their way through between showing up in the world and playing by the rules. I really do encourage you to take a look at it. I will send you an email at the end of today's session, and I'll put a reference to that book in there for you in that book review, so you can consider that. One of the other things that we said, or we spoke about earlier, and that needs to really be on our radar, is groupthink and conformity. So have you ever been in a meeting and the person that's running the meeting says, okay, so everyone's in agreement, yes? And everyone sits there and they nod their heads and they say, yeah, make positive noises. But really deep down, you don't agree. That's a small example of the pressures of conformity and groupthink. Groupthink is a psychological phenomenon in which we strive for consensus within a group. In many cases, with groupthink, people will put aside their own personal beliefs and adopt the opinion of the rest of the group. It can have major impacts on our effectiveness and the results that groups can achieve. It also leads to internal conflict for individuals. If you're an individual that perhaps does this, then start to make your voice heard. If you're a leader who recognizes that sometimes maybe you usher people along and make towards making a commitment, then invite a diverse range of opinions. Whilst we're going to take a whistle-stop tour on the business case for diversity and inclusion in just a moment, if you wanted to look further around groupthink, there's some absolutely amazing social experiments, most of which are available actually on YouTube around conformity. There's some very famous experience by Asch, some Asch experiments. And also, if you look on YouTube, there's a fantastic experiment where experimenters have a subject that goes into an elevator. And what the experimenters do, unbeknown to the individual in the elevator, is they face the wrong way. They face the back of the elevator rather than the doors. And it doesn't take long for people to start falling into line with this somewhat unusual behavior. It's a really great clip. In the email, I will send you some links for some of those clips. The elevator one is certainly one that makes me smile the most, but I will certainly share those with you. Let's turn our minds to start thinking about what are some of the benefits and the importance of being authentic. Well, firstly, it's really important to us as individuals, but it's also important to others and society as a whole, as well as our organizations. For us personally, it's important for our well-being and our mental health to feel that we feel included and we're able to be our authentic self. Because without authenticity, life certainly becomes challenging. It's stressful. It saps our energy and we feel conflicted. It's really hard work to try and be someone else or someone that you're not. Without it, we can in some ways have our wings clipped. We can limit our own achievements. As Maya Angelou summed it up rather nicely when she said, if we are trying to be normal, no one will know how amazing you can be. Benefits for society and for others are also really wide. Once one person is brave enough to show their whole self at work, they then give permission for the rest of us to show up too, as authentic people. The whole thing snowballs. It becomes self-perpetuating. When we think about the business case, there's been masses of research that point towards the benefits here. In 2019, a study by Oxford University showed that happy people are 13% more productive. Essentially, they work better, they take less sick, and they are less worried about all of those internal conflicts and can be creative and work around problem solving more effectively. People who feel included, McKinsey showed in 2020, are 3 times more likely to be engaged and loyal to the organization. A Gallup survey in 2015 showed that organizations with inclusive cultures have 39% higher customer satisfaction scores than those that don't. At the end of the day, when people feel included, they deliver better service. Happy people make for happier customers. In 2016, Gallup noted that organizations that have high levels of employee engagement report 21% higher profitability. So the business case really does stack up. However, there is a but here. McKinsey in 2020 said that more than half of the people that they surveyed think leaders need to do a better job when it comes to creating an inclusive workplace. So this leads me to our 3-point plan to help champion authenticity. Point number 1, we need to work together. We need to build psychological safety. This isn't just about bringing our own selves to work. This is about creating environments where others feel safe to do that. Step number 2, or point number 2, we need to allow time for personal reflection. And the third point is, if we're going to do this, we need to lean in and we need to be brave. So let's take a look at each of those in just a little bit more detail. As organizations, we need to create and encourage the environment of psychological safety. And what I mean by that is feeling safe and secure in being able to express your views or your thoughts without fear of ridicule or without fear of judgment. When we're free of these concerns, we have much more bandwidth in our minds to be able to think creatively, to problem solve effectively. And we're also able to collaborate more easily and be more productive, as we've already seen from those stats that I showed you just a moment ago. A study by Google that looked into what made some teams more effective than others concluded that teams that have high psychological safety exceed their targets by an average of 17%, whereas those with low psychological safety missed their targets by 19%. That's a huge difference. So how are we going to create psychological security? Well, we can do it by practicing and encouraging tolerance and acceptance. And what I mean by tolerance and acceptance is being open to a variety of different viewpoints, to different perspectives, to different ideals. We may not all see the world in the same way. We all have different experiences. But when we approach these from a point of genuine interest and curiosity, we end up gaining a greater, wider awareness. We see children doing this all of the time. In fact, it's something that we love about them, that endears them to us. the way that they approach things with this curious mind. They have no real judgment, no desire, just a desire to really understand. I remember a number of years ago when my son was really little, and he went up to my dad. My dad had lost a finger in an accident as a child. And my son looked at his hand and then looked at my dad's hand. And he said, "My finger here is long and has a nail on the end. Yours is shorter than all the rest and has no nail. Why is that, Grandad?" There was no judgment when he said that, no assumption that was made, just a recognition that something was different and an acceptance of those differences. Through our life journey, many of us end up losing this curious mind. We start to assume, we make judgments rather than seeking to understand. Tolerance and acceptance can be built through our understanding of different perspectives. As UNESCO point out, tolerance is the threshold to peace. So here are just a few ideas that we can do to increase those levels of psychological safety that people experience. We need to approach with a curious mindset. We need to keep our assumptions, our judgments, our stereotypes in check. We need to challenge ourselves to examine any fixed beliefs that we have. We need to seek out opportunities in a proactive manner to find out about other people who are different from us. And we need to practice being more tolerant and being more accepting of others. We need to be aware of our own micro behaviors. They might be tiny, but they have huge impact. And we need to learn how to be more inclusive as leaders. And take moments to remind ourselves, I am important, and so are you. A second point on our action plan is to make time for personal reflection. And the key to this is giving yourself the opportunity to reflect and to consider for yourselves. We're all living busy lives where we're having to play multiple different roles. Do we even give ourselves enough headspace to truly know ourselves? So let's take this opportunity now for us to consider a few reflective questions. If you want to simply reflect, that's fine, but it's also great if you want to go and get a piece of paper and a pen and to jot some notes down as we go. The first question I'll ask in terms of a reflective question is, if you took all your different hats off, the many different roles that you inevitably have to play in life, who are you? Who are you really? When you think about this and reflect on this version of you, which bit do you take to work and which bit do you leave at home? And how do you feel about this? Are you okay with it? Or is it something that niggles you, something that you'd like to address? So if you are going to be a more authentic version of yourself, what would that look like? Which bits of you would you start to bring? And as you identify those bits that you'd bring, what are the barriers that exist to doing this? And are they real barriers? Or are they perception driven by fear or habit? And considering those barriers, what are the consequences of ignoring them? And finally, what is the one thing you can do differently tomorrow? The thing that will make a small or a big difference. So now that you've had time to consider those, be prepared to be brave. You have got this. So I very much hope that this webinar has given you an insight how you're able to perhaps feel safer or more able to bring yourself to work. For those of you that are the architects of organizations, I hope it's given you what you need to build environments that create psychological safety and security, where people are able to express their true selves. Now I ask this of you. I ask you to become the ambassadors of bringing yourself to work. By doing this, you're not only helping yourself, but you're also helping others, enabling them to empower themselves. Let's take a moment to celebrate our diversity, to recognize that we are all as different and as individual as our thumbprints. Together, we can bring about positive change. We can bring about improvement. To use the words of Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. I'm Steve McManus from RightTrack Learning. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar in conjunction with our friends at Ukie. It's been an absolute pleasure spending this lunchtime with you. As I said earlier, I will be sending you a personal email that will have those links in to the reading list, the books, and some links to some YouTubes that I think you might be interested in. As a team here at RightTrack, we are very accessible. You know, you can contact us via social media. You'll also have my personal email when I send those links to you. Please feel free to get in contact with us. To ask questions, to share your stories of bringing yourself to work. It's your stories and your interactions that really motivate us. So now I'm going to pass over to Dom from Ukie so he can talk about Ukie and the Diversity and Inclusivity Pledge.
Thank you, Steve. That was a truly amazing webinar. I knew straight away from the get-go that it would be enticing, but I'm really glad that it was more than I imagined in practice. So again, thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you.
I wish we could do claps, but for me, I'll just do a flat, which is a autistic way of clapping. So thank you, Steve. Anyone at home, please do the same. And yes, a big reason we put on this webinar today is because it is Ukie's flagship diversity initiative called Raise the Game, first anniversary. And we really wanted to kind of do a range of activities that really celebrated what the pledge is all about, which through this webinar plays a big part of it by making sure people value themselves and actually look after themselves, because it's important for us all to have a work-life balance. But just to give anyone that's not aware of the pledge some more details, the pledge is an holistic styled initiative all about bringing together the wide games industry within the UK. It's managed and facilitated by Ukie, but it's been funded by our 5 leading founding partners, which are EA, Facebook Gaming, Xbox, Jagex, and King, which we're very grateful to have their support and have them help us not only practice what we preach, but be role models to the rest of the industry and also just provide best practice and share tips between everyone, because there is an aspect of the pledge which is all about providing guidance and being there to help people's journeys around equality, diversity, and inclusion. But I think what is so meaningful about the pledge is that it's not just about this one organization, that one organization. It's a community of like-minded companies that work or are around the video games industry that just want to have greater inclusion, transparent and welcoming environments and places to work. And we do this through a range of activities, but we have core principles, which are 3 pledge pillars. Pledge pillar 1 is all about recruitment and how we do that fairly and equally. Pledge pillar 2 is all about retention, work culture, and how do we actually create that welcoming work environment. And pledge pillar 3 is all about representation of games, but also representation of organizations beyond their games. So through their marketing, their ads, their events, and so on. So the pledge kind of uses these 3 pillars to not only allow pledge partners to be flexible about how they approach, how they're going to challenge equality, diversity, and inclusion within their own organization, but we also use these pillars to kind of give leeway to the activities we put on. Because, for example, this webinar, I would absolutely class as something a part of work culture, because if everyone in your work brought their whole selves to the work, I think everyone would overall have a much happier work-life balance, 100%. Especially, it wouldn't even feel like work sometimes. I know that's how I sometimes feel, where you are your whole self, you are appreciated, respected, and valued. And even if people have different interests and hobbies, that's what makes us all amazing, because we are so different and yet we can be so similar. But in terms of getting involved in the pledge, any organization that works or is surrounded by the video games industry, please feel free to check out the Raise the Game website, which is exactly how it's spelled behind me, raisethegame.com. But if you work for an organization or industry that may not be related to video games, as always, I'm quite open to talking about the pledge and how it can work and function with outside initiatives and organizations, because another important aspect is to connect with each other and see the intersectionality that actually all of our industries have, because actually one best practice for work culture can be applied to any industry, like this webinar has shown. But then there's also specific things that can be done within games. So if you work for a charity that's thinking about how do we interact with the games industry, or if you work for an organization that's interested in doing something similar within your sector, the pledge is always here to talk, welcome, and be welcoming. So I hope that gives everyone some more information, but please do get in touch with me at dom@ukie.org.uk if you do have any more questions. I will be passing my email as well to Steve to put into the email, so that way anyone who wants to find out more about Raise the Game can. And once again, it's our 1-year anniversary, so we're putting on a range of activities. If you go to the website, there's a lot of website content currently, mainly around case studies that various of our partners and supporters have done to show what they're doing around the equality, diversity, and inclusion, and also how the pledges help them. So if you want to see what game companies are actually doing, or see what other game companies are doing, that's the great first step. But the second step is to get in touch with me. But as always, just to come back and circle it, RightTrack Learning have been an amazing partner. And if you need more training, more advice, please get in touch with them. I definitely know as an organization, Ukie will be working with them further. And hopefully, if we have a year 2 anniversary, we might put on another similar webinar. But there's nothing confirmed yet, so don't put that in your diaries yet. But
Be glad to do it.
Thank you again, everyone. I hope this has been a really nice lunchtime for you. I know it has for me. And I look forward to hearing back from anyone if they get in touch, or hearing any feedback on Twitter and LinkedIn. So just to end it off, if you do want to tag this event or highlight it on social media, please once again use the hashtags of RightTrack Learning, Ukie, that undercase IE at on Twitter via the hashtag Raise the Game, or on LinkedIn via both our companies' names. And that is how you do that. Steve, anything else you'd like to add before we let these lovely people go away and have lunch?
I know we're getting close on our time. I'm just checking in the chat. There's a couple of people asking whether they can have slides, the slide deck that we've used. Yeah, absolutely. What we will actually do is, if you want to request from us, from the email that I send you, we can give you a recording of this as well. So if you wanted to go over that again or to relook at it, we can also make the slides available to you. A couple of people asking about the book as well. Absolutely, we'll make sure that link is in there for you, so you can all go out there and be more pirate.
I definitely know I want to be more pirate after this, hearing about
Who wouldn't want to?
Excellent. I think with that then, unless there's any more questions that pop up quickly. But again, thank you everyone, and I really appreciate all your lovely comments in the chat as well. Just in case people are like, what about my thank you? Well,
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, there's lots of appreciation going on there. So yeah, that really means a lot to both Dom and myself. Absolutely.